I realized that given the delay in the overall session flow, I think this is one session that is stopping us and the close of this conference. So thank you very much for your patience, and I hope that you have the patience for the next some time as well as we come to the closure of the entire conference. Firstly, thank you, Mithali ma'am. I think Mithali ma'am has come all the way from Nagpur, and I have to appreciate her because I think she she has she has twins, by the way, and she just had twins a few 7 months back. And this was the first time she flew the twins also. And we are so glad you could make it. I know it was very far away, but thank you so much for coming. And Manju Nimkar, obviously, everyone knows her, Pragat Shikshan Sanstha, which is from Fulton, one of the renowned sort of organizations which is promoted early childhood education and FLN. So I'm not going to do much on the introductions because I'm sure you will have a lot to sort of do. But I think I'll just jump straight into the questions. Sir, माझा प्रश्न असा होता, I think let's start from मंजुताई. आणि बरेच दिवसापासून आपण ऐकतोय की the end of the day it has to be like a political will. Either administration say like it has to be. Unfortunately, in India, children below 18 cannot vote. And I think that seems to be the biggest issue why there is no political will. It always comes back to that. Children in India do not have a voice, right? And that seems to be the core of the issue of why administration is much better that way, but I think there is no real backing the way they see backing of a skilling, better roads, tall statues, nuclear missiles, but people spend less on education and development. What you have spent your lifetime with children. What do you think on this?
First of all, thank you for calling me here. And I've had a great time since morning, especially listening to Panse sir and Sawan sir. And of course the other fights between Nilesh and... Anyway, it's been very enjoyable. Now coming to my question, I think I agree with you because children have no voice, and so nothing really happens. And the younger the children, the lesser voice they have. They may scream at the top of their voices, but nothing really happens. They are just not taken seriously. They don't have much language, as I would say. Older children have the language, even children older than that, and adults have a lot of language. But little children don't know how to express themselves, and so it is the bodily language that they will express themselves in, but which nobody pays any attention to, unfortunately. So what you said was quite right, and throughout today, everybody is talking about it. It is the Anganwadi Sevika. First of all, we don't even call her a teacher. She is a Sevika. She is a part-time worker. In English, she is called worker. She is paid very little. And actually, as somebody said in the morning, that it should start, a PhD person should be teaching the youngest. I myself have taught the 10th standard, and the lowest I could go was 2nd standard. Balwadi I could not manage. 10th was very easy. 2nd was pretty difficult, and I couldn't make it for more than 1 year. It needed a lot of work and sustenance. So right from there, the teachers, the Balwadi teachers, are looked at as if they cannot teach, so that's why the 1st and 2nd standard teachers will come and teach the Balwadi children. The fact is, Balwadi children cannot be taught. They will learn by themselves. You have to be a facilitator. And Anganwadi Sevika probably can do that much better than any of the primary, secondary or higher teachers. Then it's the places where children are playing or learning. They are not child friendly because an adult looks at the spaces from an adult's perspective. And so they are, even today, if you go into the Anganwadis, the adults think that if we paint the Anganwadis with lions and hippos and giraffes, it will become child friendly. While that is not so. It just causes, what would you say, visual noise. Drishya gongat is what we call it. And so everything we are doing, we are looking at things from an adult's perspective, not from a child's perspective. So I don't know how to make that change, make that flip over, but that needs to be done very badly.
Thank you, Manjari. And Mitali ji, you've been the CEO of Chandrapur for some time and obviously implemented a lot of programs. And I know early childhood education and education in general has been close to your heart. Uh, and oftentimes this thing around like government is so good at converting inputs into schemes. Basically, if you want to equity का भी building बनाना है तो उसका एक scheme निकाल दो, equity करना है from a girl child ने चाचा cycle दिला दो उसका एक scheme कर दो, right? And when you're living in such a complex, and I know we connected on that line which I said, the life of the frontline workers in the government is a life of inputs. It is a life of compliance. कि सब लोग देखते हैं और टीचर का अगर आंगनवाड़ी का अगर बुक वगैरह ठीक है तो सब ठीक है. And government incentivizes people on inputs and not on outcomes of this thing. I know it's changing, but I think that's a generalistic view. In all of this, I know the session is way forward, but I wanted to touch upon these two things around just how challenging it is to run a district from your point of view when you look at achieving these outcomes for children.
So it's difficult because sometimes you are rebelling against where you are in the first place. And I feel like I'm not, sometimes when I'm sitting on that chair, I feel like I'm not just an IS officer, I'm also an educator. I come from being a teacher. I'm also a mother. And I see my kids, and as Manjrita has set such a nice context, because it's so difficult to teach my kids. I sometimes wake up in the morning and I'm like, if they're rebelling and they're saying कि मुझे ये book नहीं पढ़ना है, it's difficult to sort of have that ego and say कि यार मैं जो पढ़ा रही हूँ ये पढ़ ही नहीं रहा है. And he's constantly like, no. And I mean, we were traveling today in the morning and I was constantly like trying to say, I am your mother and look at me, I'm entertaining you. And he was like, I don't want to be entertained by you, I want to see the car. And sometimes it's nice to sort of see the rebellion of even a 7-month-old and then just stay there and say that, this is a nicely raised child. And when I'm sitting there in the district also, I feel like these are not different children. They're children like I have children. So why don't we sort of give credit to the rebellion of children and look at them as somebody who is full of their own ideas and would like education or would like to be educated in a certain manner. And then, I go back to what was Nilesh and Ayush sir were discussing. I'm so sorry I missed Panse sir because I've heard your name like 5 bar in the 2 sessions I've... Anganwadi Sevika, the first time I went to Telangana, I remember meeting the WCD secretary, and the first thing that struck me is in Telangana, they call Anganwadi Sevika Anganwadi teacher. And when I went to their rehabilitation ka building, they had this beautiful television up there where every Anganwadi teacher was teaching a child, and it was being broadcasted, and it was through song and dance, and everybody was just dancing together. And it was not, you just could not sort of stand there and say that this is padhai. You would have said that, oh my God, everybody is playing. And then in that rehabilitation ka building, there were children, they were looking at what is happening and they were also dancing. And would you not call this education? I would. They are getting educated. And so when you sit in a district, the difficult question, of course, is, I remember speaking with you also about this, and the difficult question is, I am here for 3 years. And then when I'm here and when I go back, what is the difference that I'm going to make? Is it measurable? It's a very difficult question to answer, and we've had a full meeting on that. And there's ACER, and sometimes I feel ACER falls so short of what I want to do and what is it really that I'm going to measure. But I feel like, your normative position has to be very different when you are as an administrator, like Ayush sir was saying that, subah ek PDF aata hai and there's that lal, yellow and green. It's nice to sort of be in green, but it's also nice to sort of wake up one day and realize that where do you really want to go as an officer and where do you want to take the country in the next 20, 30 years, So it is difficult, but I also feel that the confluence needs to be of quality, but also understanding that somewhere down the line, maybe it's not perfect, and you cannot do perfect measurement, but it is important to see where we are going, whether it is through a randomized sample survey, whether it is through a 100% sample survey. But I would like to put my heart in and put my heart out there, but see at the end of 1 year or 2 year or 3 years, where is it that I'm going? And if there could be a confluence of both these things, that would be lovely for as an administrator to have. Yeah.
No, thank you. Thank you so much. Especially this aspect around how do you measure, plus like the state capacity, because I know you touched upon like the capacity of the state also. But coming on this point around measurement, Manjutai, तुमच्यासाठी एक प्रश्न होता. Especially ज्यावेळेला आपण when we're doing an intervention in particular, say like few अंगणवाडीज, नाहीतर आपला स्वतःचा एक शाळा आपण चालवतोय, we will see fabulous results, right? 10 शाळा असेल, ठीक आहे, 50 schools, 60 schools. But when you try to scale any of these amazing interventions, आणि तुम्ही पण बरेच काही प्रयोग केले होते शिक्षकांसोबत, both in district and across the state, there is a complete voltage decline of results in terms of what we envisioned this needs to happen when scale comes into picture. And I know you've always been associated with the Pragat Shiksha Sansthan, and you've seen that happening in your school. But when you think of so many thousands and millions of children out there, what does it really take to universalize such good practices and innovations?
I would say that X practices are good for my school or for Phaltan Taluka or X place, but that is not necessarily so for a Y place. So what I am looking at it as is, I would say that Anganwadi Sevikas or a certain district or a certain taluka should be given more autonomy. And there are some very foundational, fundamental things that I will put as my program. All the other things will come add-on. Right, so now we are working in Latur, and we have allowed the Anganwadi Sevikas to do a lot of things on their own. Some of them I may not agree with, but I will not go to them saying, see, this is my program and you implement this. Instead, I will tell them that this is how this needs to be done, so what shall we do? And they may do things on their own. Some of them I do not agree with, but the enthusiasm of the Anganwadi Sevikas, the motivation through which they do it, then the children who are happy, then the parents who are happy. So I am not going to try and find out, can the child say 1, 2, 3, 4 up to 10? Can the child say Obakado or whatever it is? Something that the child can do in our school. That child there may not be able to do that, but the child comes ahead and he pulls at my sari and says, you look at my picture, no? Why are you talking to my teacher? So this is something I find that the child has that confidence. Whatever I have done is good. I can write and I can read this out to this woman who has come here to look at our Balwadi or Anganwadi. So this is what I would look at the assessment as. I will not go there as a paper and call each child and examine the child like that. And so assessment, I would say, has different meanings, and we should try to find assessments which take many other, what would you say, different things into consideration rather than just certain foundational literacy and numeracy skills.
Right. Mitali ji, the same question to you, because I know there was a lot of efforts that you took to, scale some of the initiatives, both engaging mothers in that 0 to 3 also. But some learnings from there on, just like how do you scale some of these innovations?
I want to tell that story I told you when you came home.
Hmm.
So there was this girl, ma'am, Amanjari Tai. Actually, me migration चा काम करत होती, and we built a migration tracking system where I was posted in Melghat earlier. And we were working with Chandrapur ka communities, and I remember going to this village जहाँ पे this family was really migrating every time. चंद्रपूर से मिर्ची तोड़ने का काम पे जाते थे. आम्ही आईसोबत बोलत होती आणि मी त्यांना विचारला की तुमची मुलगी काय करते जेव्हा तुम्ही मिरची तोडण्यासाठी जातात. मग तिने सांगितलं की ड्रॉप आउट होते हैं. एंड यू नो वी वर लाइक पूरा वो सरकार का जत्था जाता है ना, मतलब पूरा मेरे एग्रीकल्चर ऑफिसर भी थे, पूरा गांव वहीं जमा हुआ था, तो सारे लोग आए वो आई को ही देख रहे थे. एंड ऑल ऑफ अस वा अच्छा यू नो व्हेन यू हियर लाइक अ गर्ल चाइल्ड इज ड्रॉपिंग यू आर ऑलवेज लाइक यू नो इसको क्या आता होगा पढ़ाई का. एंड वी वर लाइक अच्छा तो फिर कितने महीने के लिए जाते हो, 2-3 महीने के लिए जाते हैं, कितने पैसे मिलते हैं, और ऑल दिस क्वेश्चंस वर गोइंग ऑन. 10 मिनिटानंतर ती मुलगी आली. And I was telling Madhukar, she had this radiant face, you know, where you look at a child and you're like, this is a very happy child. So she just came and she started playing, and my agricultural officer was right with me, and he came and he said, "तू 2 पाड़ा मन मी तुला 10 रुपये देऊ." And this girl looks at my agricultural officer and she's like, "You don't think I know 2 का पाड़ा?" So she फटफट like says 2 का पाड़ा, and she's a 6th class child. So I looked at my agricultural officer and like, "दो 10 रुपये." So he takes out 10 rupees and she said, "Why are you giving me 10 rupees? I don't want your 10 rupees." And then I asked her, I said, "तुझा favorite subject कोणता?" And she said, "Maths." And I said, "कुठपर्यंत येते table?" And she said, 11, which I think is a very good level. And sometimes, you know, I go back to what Sugata Mitra used to say, that we don't sometimes need teachers and we don't need schools. Children are going to learn. They're like those, वो मिट्टी में से फूल निकल आता है ना, कि भाई आपने स्कूल बंद कर दिया, आपने माइग्रेशन कर लिया, तो बच्चे ने सीखना बंद नहीं किया. But you know, your question of assessment, I feel like I had 1,500 schools in Chandrapur. And I feel like the systems where monitoring is difficult, where you know you have multiple units and you say कि इसको monitor कैसे करें, how do I ensure that my BO is going, how do I ensure? I feel like there, how Savan sir was mentioning, networking through stakeholders, and you say कि a school is not only of children, it's also of parents, it's also of SMC, it's also of Gram Panchayat, of the Sarpanch. And find a good grievance redressal mechanism, and then give that power in people's hands, and then say कि कहाँ पे टीचर नहीं आया हमको एक फ़ोन करो, or sort of raise a complaint, because as a CEO, the only way I can reach towards people is through a direct communication strategy. Now obviously if the teacher is coming, या टीचर दारू पी के आ रहा है, या टीचर आ नहीं रहा है, या टीचर पढ़ा नहीं रहा है, somebody somewhere would complain, right? And there will be a school जहाँ पे ज़्यादा problem है, वहाँ का ज़्यादा complaints आएगा ही. This is something that I really believe in, कि भाई ऐसा कुछ होगा तो कोई ना कोई तो बताएगा ना, वो स्कूल से 50 शिक्षक पढ़ रहे हैं. तो that assessment is really important. And one last thing that I want to sort of measure here, tell you in terms of assessment and all that, our systems also, we look at them as very linear units. I mean, हम schools को ऐसे देखते हैं कि ये school में ये बच्चा आएगा ही. One of the aspects that is generally not touched when we speak about continuous education is migration, and it's a big thing, you know, because we talk about universalization of education. You will see that in tribal areas, in remote areas, in very poor areas, you will find the worst indicators of education. And sometimes it's important, and I'm not talking about education. You line up nutrition, you line up education, you line up service delivery, health. Everything is bad in all these areas. And if you start using GIS and you start using mapping of these areas, you will find clusters of places in India where places are not like Pune. And you know, where I've worked in Melghat, where I worked in Chandrapur, there are clusters. So when you start looking at education and you start looking at solutions, you don't put, like Nilesh sir was saying, that Pune is different and Gadchiroli is different. The amount of, and I understand that he said that Gadchiroli को आप compare नहीं कर सकते, but 10 साल के बाद भी ऐसी चीज़ बोलेंगे तो शर्म आनी चाहिए ना. Now we have to put extra effort in Gadchiroli, we know that. And with migration, when we were working in Melghat, these trucks of people would go to Akola and would go to all these places to work. And अब जब मैं गवर्नमेंट से पूछती हूँ, आप कभी आप डिफेंसिव ऑफिसर वुड से, हे माय स्कूल्स आर पोर्टेबल, सो इफ यू कम एंड आस्क इफ आई कैन बी एनरोल्ड, यू कैन बी एनरोल्ड, बट लुक एट द बार्गेन ऑफ पावर. वुड अ कोरकू स्पीकिंग आदिवासी पर्सन हु इज गोइंग फॉर मैनुअल लेबर इन अ कॉन्ट्रैक्टर का जगह, उसे पता नहीं है स्कूल कहाँ है. सो to say कि हमारे schools portable is not enough. I mean, the government needs to sort of be proactive and say कि for vulnerable population, for pregnant, lactating, for children, for somebody who's a manual labor, we will go out, look for children and then put them in school and then ask them, what do you want continuous education? And what do you do of assessment then? So your assessment systems also need to be portable, and somewhere down the line, the child, the parent, the teacher, everybody need to see कि अच्छा कहाँ चल रहा है, without sort of making the child feel bad about it. That's the last point that I want to make. The assessment is for us to know. से हम कभी-कभी ना ZP के स्कूल में क्या होता है, ओवर एंथुजियाज्म हो जाता है कि अच्छा स्कूल का ये रेड ब्लू है, ये शाले के बाहर लगा देते हैं. शाले के बाहर नहीं लगाना है. बच्चे को क्यों दिखा रहे हो कि तुम लाल में हो? It is for us to understand कि यार हम क्या गलती कर रहे हैं. So somewhere down the line I feel like, you know, when we think of assessment and we think of scale, it is very important. I would definitely say that we need systems at scale. तो करो ना FLN, ये systems करने हैं, ACER भी use करना है, but it is our floor and not the ceiling.
Absolutely. And I think this is very critical. And I think one of the biggest criticisms जब निपुण भारत मिशन लॉन्च हुआ था, and this the criticism was अगर benchmark ही हमने ये कर दिया कि FLN achieve करना है, तो FLN के अलावा कोई करेगा ही नहीं. So even if we say कि 30% बच्चे पढ़ पा रहे हैं, 30 तो पढ़ पा रहे हैं ना, 30 को तो आगे बढ़ना है. आप पूरा 100% करोगे तो then people will feel कि successful जब FLN हो गया, बाकियों का क्या? Right? I think those who are able to do, because there's also, I know Malti is here, she always talks about the spectrum. There are high performing children also in any sort of a thing. So what you're letting them behind, you're keeping them behind. But I think on this point, Manjuta, I think just this idea, I know बरेच चर्चा झाला around the whole spectrum, म्हणजे 3 years and 2 years. What in your opinion, what needs to, because this is a $1 million question. I don't think anyone has an answer of, I think Hayus sir, I think he started the question, but I think they पण म्हणले की that is something that I think structurally exists everywhere. But what can be a solution even at a local level that can be found for just making sure that that 5-year continuum is there for the children?
I remember when I first went to Rajasthan, they had their primary 1 to 5. And in Maharashtra, it is 1 to 4. The 5th is many times connected to the high school, 5 onwards. And so I was talking to our BEO, a good friend of ours. So I said, why can't we make it 1 to 5? So the number of things he told me, I could see that it was impossible. The same thing is going to happen. So I don't know. We have got this system. So where the Balwadis are or Anganwadis are with ICDS and first and second standard are with primary school. Rather than disrupt the whole system, which is not going to be possible, what can we do as a midway? For many years, at least in Maharashtra, especially in western Maharashtra, most Anganwadis are situated near primary schools. So they do get some benefit from it, like teachers come sometimes, not really. But they do get some benefits that the school is nearby, the children are singing some songs or something, and the Anganwadi children hear them. And so I personally feel that there is no point in taking the Anganwadi and taking it to the school or taking the first and second standard, because they also need to be with third and fourth standard. And so taking them out and connecting them to the Balwadis, I don't think there is any point. So unless there is a complete somersault and change, things are not going to change. So why disrupt something? Why not try to improve on it? And like we were doing a program in Patan Taluka in 150 villages. And what we did, that we used to take our libraries into the schools, and then we would take the books into the Anganwadis also. We were actually not working with the Anganwadis. Our program was for primary school. But the Anganwadi teachers were interested, the children were interested, and the parents were interested. So that is something doable. So I think we should do that and try to bring as many good practices of primary into the Anganwadis. Now looking at it the other way around, the primary teachers shout at the Anganwadi workers saying, काय तयारीच नाही करून दिली तुम्ही मुलांची, काही येत नाही आहे मुलांना. मुलांना ह्यांनी नाहीच आहे शिकवायचं, त्यांचं कामच नाही आहे ते. मुलांना शिकवायचं ABCD 1 2 जे काही शिकवायचं असेल तुम्हाला ते प्राथमिक शिक्षकांचं काम आहे ना, पहिलीच्या शिक्षकांचं काम आहे, ह्यांचं नाही आहे. सो त्यांनी ते करावं. बट ॲट द सेम टाईम इफ चिल्ड्रन आर नॉट सिटिंग इन द क्लास, it is there are some things that can be taken from some practices that can be taken from the Anganwadis into the primary schools. काही साध्या छोट्या छोट्या गोष्टी आहेत आणि आकारमध्ये सुद्धा काही गोष्टींचा उल्लेख केलेला आहे की कॉर्नर्स मांडायचे, लर्निंग सेंटर्स मांडायचे, पुस्तकाचा सेंटर एक त्याच्यामध्ये असतो. असे जर सेंटर्स प्राथमिकला पहिलीला मांडले तर जास्त मुलं तिथे रमतील आणि स्वतःच्या स्पीडनी शिकतील. त्याच्यामुळे अशा काही गोष्टी आहेत की ज्या आपल्याला सरळ उचलून अंगणवाडीमधनं पहिलीच्या वर्गामध्ये पहिले 3-4 महिने नेऊन ठेवता येतील. अवघड नाही आहे ते. आणि आत्ता शाळा प्रवेश वगैरेच्या ज्या गोष्टी केलेल्या आहेत त्याच्यामध्ये दुसरं काही नाही आहे, त्याच्यामध्ये बालवाडीच्याच गोष्टी आहेत त्या पहिलीमध्ये करा असं सांगतात बेसिकली.
राईट. बट मितालीजी, सेम क्वेश्चन. इज इट द बिग क्वेश्चन दॅट ऑफन NGOs have is it worth the fight? मतलब is this a fight that we want to fight?
No, my simple answer is no.
No. अच्छा.
Because I feel like what Manjari Tai also said is कि अभी जो प्रथम का भी पूरा ये हुआ है where you know the transition is happening and they're like शाला प्रवेश में ये करना है. And if you look at the brochure आणि हा पाहला की मग तो तेच आहे की आंगनवाडी should transition out. And I think Nilesh sir was asking this question to Ayush sir, and I disagree a little bit on the skepticism, you know, because I don't think everywhere the primary teacher is like की तुम्ही कशासाठी शिकवतात. I think there are a lot of areas where primary teacher and Anganwadi teacher are already working quite harmoniously. So they are like कि हाँ बच्चों को पढ़ाना है, बच्चे ही हमारा फोकस हैं, एंड आप पढ़ा दो ABCD को. ये क्वेश्चन ही क्यों है कि आप इनको कॉर्नर पढ़ाओ, और क्यों आंगनवाड़ी में जो बच्चे आते हैं उनका लेवल तो बहुत अलग अलग होगा. तो हो सकता है कि एक बच्चे को घर पे ऑलरेडी ABCD पढ़ा दी हो, तो उसे आंगनवाड़ी टीचर और कुछ नहीं क्यों नहीं पढ़ा सकती. तो वी आर नॉट, एजुकेशन और स्टूडेंट्स आर नॉट अ होमोजीनियस सिस्टम ना कि सबको सेम ही पढ़ाना है नहीं तो कुछ हो जाएगा. क्यों 4 लोगों को और थोड़ा एक्स्ट्रा नहीं पढ़ा सकते, या वो 4 लोग का लेवल अगर अच्छा है तो प्राइमरी टीचर आके पे. आई थिंक व्हाट वी नीड टू डू, लाइक इवन NGO एडमिनिस्ट्रेटर या कोई भी स्टेक होल्डर है, इज टू यू नो, वो फैसिलिटेटर का काम होता है ना, वेयर यू सॉर्ट ऑफ बिहेव लाइक अ मिडवाइफ एंड से कि बच्चा किसने पैदा किया, माँ ने किया है, मैं तो मिडवाइफ ही हूँ. तो वो बच्चा पैदा करने वाली चीज़ आंगनवाड़ी टीचर और टीचर्स ही हैं, हम मिडवाइफ हैं. Where we sort of just throw the seed out there and just stand at a distance and stand in awe and say कि wow इन्होंने क्या काम कर दिया. And I mean Ayush sir was sitting here and he spoke about Madam Shobha Madam, and he said that wow इन्होंने कितना अच्छा ऐप किया है. You know, now when she goes back and she does something and she knows कि यार कितना अच्छा काम किया, सावंत सर ने मेरी तारीफ़ की, आयुष सर ने मेरी तारीफ़ की, and मैं आपकी तारीफ़ कर रही हूँ, and because she's doing such a wonderful work and she should sort of go back and say कि इसको और अच्छा कैसे करना है. So could we sort of become parents to these Anganwadi teachers and teachers and sort of say कि can we just encourage them for what they're doing, motivate them and say कि बहुत अच्छा कर रहे हो और अच्छा करो. I mean there are bad people and I definitely feel कि जब मैं CEO थी तब मैं यही बोलती थी कि यार if a teacher is drinking and going to the school or if a teacher is not coming and all that, उनको side कर दो. I'm not talking about them. उनके लिए regulatory practices हैं, law में provisions हैं, and we'll use that. बट कहीं कहीं मुझे ऐसा लगता है कि बहुत लोग डरते हैं गवर्नमेंट में काम करने के लिए. ऐसे लोग बहुत ज़्यादा हैं कंपेयर टू लोग जो बिल्कुल काम नहीं करते. तो क्या हम उनका डर थोड़ा सा कम करके उनको क्रिएटिव फ्रीडम दे सकते हैं क्या कि यार जाओ और सिखाओ बच्चों को. और क्योंकि मुझे नहीं लगता हम उन बच्चों को इतने अच्छे से जानते हैं जितने अच्छे से वो जानते हैं. तो वो जो नॉलेज है उनकी, उसको अगर थोड़ा सा प्रोत्साहन और मोटिवेशन दे दी तो शायद वो अच्छे सिस्टम्स, कॉम्बिनेशन वाले सिस्टम्स आएंगे. एंड वो चेंज सिर्फ हमसे नहीं होना है, मंत्रालय तक होना है, गवर्नमेंट तक होना है, डायरेक्ट मतलब वहाँ पे भी बैठ के सेक्रेटरी शुड नॉट बी लाइक के आंगनवाड़ी हमारी है और स्कूल हमारा है. वो वर्स्ट पॉसिबल सिनेरियो ना. तो वहाँ पे भी बैठ के अगर क्यों ऐसा नहीं हो सकता कि दोनों सेक्रेटरी दोनों तरह की चीज़ों का मीटिंग ले लें. So it's about what sort of message you are sending on the field, and that normative position, वो तरह का environment बनाना is extremely important.
And just want to, I think before I come to the last question to both of you, I want to touch upon, because I know your new role in Vanamati is more about training the middle management, which is basically I know Vanamati is an agriculture, Vasantrao Naik Institute, but similar concept can be applied to education as well, especially जे तुमचे केंद्र प्रमुख असेल, ब्लॉक एजुकेशन विस्तार अधिकारी, बिकॉज एंड ऑफ द डे सिस्टम इतना बड़ा है कि वो मोटिवेशन करने का काम एक सीईओ भी नहीं कर सकते हैं, एक सेक्रेटरी भी नहीं कर सकता. इट हैज़ टू बी लोकलाइज. ये मंजूताई म्हणत होते कि दैट पर्टिकुलर केंद्र प्रमुख हैज़ टू इंस्पायर, मोटिवेट, सपोर्ट दोज ग्रुप ऑफ टीचर्स. Now this whole idea of capacity building of middle management, which is what I think one of the core works that LFE does, right? Saying कि जब तक वो middle management को आप strengthen नहीं करते हो, तब तक ये मुश्किल ही है, whatever outcomes you want to do. So I want to understand from your point of your perspective around like that, how did you see that now in agriculture or before in WCD or in education?
I have this thing that I brought and I wanted to sort of read one paragraph. I was reading something. So, and because this is your last question, I just want to close. मैंने एक महीना पहले ना कैलकुलस सीखना शुरू किया. मैंने सोचा कि यार मुझे मैथ्स नहीं आता, मैं ज़िंदगी में कभी अच्छे से मैथ्स नहीं किया, तो मैं वापस से करूँगी. And there's this somebody from IIT Bombay was teaching me. तो वो ना बहुत फ्रस्ट्रेट हो जाता है यार बेचारा, बिकॉज वो उस दिन मुझे सिखा रहा था, लॉग आ गया, मुझे लॉग ही नहीं आता. फिर उसने बोला कि साइन कॉज, मतलब साइन कॉज भी भूल गया. तो देन इज़ लाइक अच्छा इसको ये भी सिखाना पड़ेगा, ये भी. इज़ अ वेरी पेशेंट टीचर, मतलब वो बेचारा. और वो मुझे व्हाट मंजरी था वाज सेइंग कि उसने बोला कि यार तुमको सिखा के ना मुझे वो फर्स्ट क्लास के बच्चे को सिखाना बड़ा मुश्किल लग रहा है कि यार बड़ा मुश्किल रहता है पढ़ाना फर्स्ट क्लास के बच्चे को. So then I was just looking, and there's this document on internet, which I think all of you, some of you must have read. It's called A Mathematician's Lament. So Paul Lockhart was a mathematician, and he wrote this in 2002. He's a teacher in Brooklyn. And it's a very long document, but I was just reading it, and मुझे बड़ा ही, like, मेरे लिए बहुत ये लगता है, because I feel like I am also a student right now. So he says this, कि he speaks about music. एंड ही सेज के इमेजिन के मैथ्स को अगर म्यूज़िक को अगर मैथ्स की तरह पढ़ाते स्कूल में, ऐसे बोलते कि यार इसको तो सानी धापा भी नहीं आता, इसका फाउंडेशनल लिटरेसी गया है. एंड देन ही सेड कि यार इमेजिन व्हाट वी वुड हैव डन टू म्यूजिक, यू नो, इफ वी वुड हैव डन थिंग्स लाइक दैट. सो दिस वन पैराग्राफ एंड ही सेज कि सैडली आवर प्रेजेंट सिस्टम ऑफ मैथमेटिक्स एजुकेशन इज प्रिसाइजली दिस काइंड ऑफ नाइटमेयर. In fact, if I had to design a mechanism for the express purpose of destroying a child's natural curiosity and love of pattern making, I couldn't possibly do as good a job as is currently being done. I simply wouldn't have the imagination to come up with the kind of senseless, soul-crushing ideas that constitute contemporary mathematics education. Everyone knows that something is wrong. The politicians say we need higher standards. The schools say we need more money and equipment. Educators say one thing and teachers say another. They are all wrong. The only people who understand what is going on are the ones most often blamed and least often heard. कौन है? Students. They say math class is stupid and boring, and they're right. So I go back to my calculus class and sometimes he's teaching and I'm like, ये क्या orange apple बता रहा है, मुझे कुछ समझ नहीं आ रहा. And then he invents a fun way of telling me something. And I remember somebody, Sugata Mitra, when he talks of tangent, and he says कि यार जब tangent पढ़ाते हो तो आप ये मत बताओ ना कि ये सर्कल है, यहाँ से लाइन जा रही है. तुम कहो कि यार एक कॉन्स्टलेशन है, उसका कोई तारा आ रहा है, वो जब अर्थ को हिट करता है ना तो वो पॉइंट पे tangent बनता है. And I feel like, you know, when you're training people, whether I am in Vanamati, whether you are training educators, whether educators are training teachers, whether teachers are training students, studying is play. And I think a big problem of what we do sometimes is set all these targets and अच्छी बात है because हम लोगों को वो करना चाहिए, but not when we are making children teach. बोर्ड रूम में बैठ के करते हैं, कॉन्फ्रेंसेज में करते हैं, हम करें, लेकिन बच्चों के साथ वी हैव टू रिमेंबर दैट यू नो बच्चे आर नॉट गोइंग टू स्टडी बिकॉज वी आर आस्किंग देम टू स्टडी. बच्चे विल लुक एट व्हाट वी आर डूइंग, बच्चे विल लुक एट हाउ वी आर टॉकिंग टू ईच अदर. अगर आंगनवाड़ी टीचर और टीचर झगड़ा करेंगे तो बच्चे भी जाके झगड़ा ही करेंगे. तो वो ट्रेनिंग में जब मैं वनामती में लोगों को बुलाती हूँ तो देन आई ऑलवेज से कि यार मैं इनके साथ बैठूँ तो मैं इस साइड बैठूँ कि उस साइड बैठूँ. What makes them feel more confident in how they are training. And of course the hard work of designing their curricula, which is extremely important. I feel like that hard work has to be done before they come. It's not, Vanamati cannot say कि यार सबका training ऐसा ही होगा, same ही होगा, we'll not do any hard work, we'll start our work when that training has happened. When you did this conference, a lot of work would have gone into building your agenda and that work has to be done, the hard work has to be done. But once you do that, leave room for play and creativity and then say that, you know, children will do something amazing. which will sort of, your agenda will be one side and children will be one side, and you have to, the only job of a teacher, the only job of an educator or an administrator sometimes is to step aside. And I think that, and leave way for, that creativity and freedom, and to see and say, wow. And I think for me, that's my biggest understanding as an officer also, no matter where I'm posted. And I think that's something that all of us need to do.
Yeah. In fact, I started off the day. Thank you. I think if you want to, yeah, please applause. If I started off the day with that, I said, like, to achieve this quality education in India, the two binding constraints I feel is pedagogy and governance. And I think you spoke about both of them. Being an administrator, I think you were speaking a bit about pedagogy. But final question to the both of you. Where do you find the hope? I know we've spoken about the challenges, right? And I think both of you bring in that perspective, being an administrator, being an educator. And it's often a question that we as non-profit organizations, every day seeing these challenges, sometimes you get dejected, ki bhai, kis liye kar rahe hai? Like, especially, I mean, working with the governments, I think how many of you work, वो कभी-कभी लगता है यार भाई क्यों ही सिखाना, इससे तो अच्छा मैं एक स्कूल खोल के बच्चे को ही सिखा दूँ सीधा, that kind of frustration. आपको भी ऐसे लगता है? So I think that kind of frustrations keep happening, but it is important to find hope. Let it be an administrator, because we're all working for that cause of all children. Where do we find a hope in all the challenges that are there in front of us? How do we find that hope? Where do you personally find your hope?
Well, I find my hope among the children. And I'm always amazed with the things that children come up with. In our Balwadi, once what happened was all the teachers were, there is a workshop that we take for our children. It's called Relay Shani. It is about discussing relationships. And all the teachers also attend these workshops. So there was a holiday for school. So the children asked the teacher, where were you? Why did we have a holiday? So the teacher said, see, we had this workshop. What did you do in the workshop? So teacher said that we talked about our mothers and our birth. She told them everything. Then the child, many children in fact, they drew pictures of themselves inside their mothers. And this of where they were in their mother's body were fantastic. And one child wrote that I had great fun when I was inside my mother's stomach, and we used to laugh a lot, and we used to chat a lot, and we used to eat all sorts of things. So that, look at the resilience of that child. So it is the children who give us hope and who give us a lot of happiness in life also. So if we learn to not stick to the lines and can go out a little, then I think there is a lot of hope. So for the state as well as the educators, they should prepare something which is from the point of view of a child rather than from an adult's point of view. Then there will be hope, I feel.
Right.
So I'm sure like what Manjari said is completely true for me also. And for me as an administrator, I find my hope in communities and collaboration. Because I feel like as an administrator, there's need for that humility and humbleness, and to say that, she has worked all her life. I'm nothing compared. I sometimes feel I don't even deserve to sort of sit on the same platform, because the only reason we sit together is because hum shayad field mein kaam karte hain and you want sort of an administrator's perspective. But at no point would I ever say that my education work is anything compared to Manjari Tai's work. So when I work with her, or when I'm thinking about education, when I'm learning about education, it is so important to listen to everything she's saying, and to understand where I might be going wrong, and to take her input in that thing, and then build something together. I just feel that there is so much hope. I have no reason to be skeptical or disillusioned of what is happening, because there's, like she said, children are of course so resilient, but I also feel we talk about government machinery, and we talk about BOs, and we talk about teachers, and we talk about diet. I feel like when we get up in the morning, we always the sense of purpose ढूंढते हैं ना. तो सब ढूंढते हैं. Even if a teacher is a drunkard, तो उसको भी देखने का एक नज़रिया है ना कि भाई is this person morally inherently wrong or can we do something about this? And I think if anybody who is sitting on a leadership position needs to find that strength in themselves so that they can take that responsibility and say that I'm going to look at this with that perspective and I'm going to take this challenge and I'm going to turn it around. If there is a need to turn it around, and I feel that so many amazing things are happening, you know, and we need to focus on that, build from what is happening there, and then sort of universalize it, and it will happen. I have no doubts about it. Yeah.
Awesome. And I think what I'm taking away, I think at least listening to the both of you is just a combination of the love for children. I think way forward there might be 100 solutions. Of course, we know challenges इतने सारे हैं कि भाई technical निकल जाएंगे, political administration challenges, we know things that need to be done, but I think a core of it is what I'm taking away from the last things you shared is just a pure love for children. And I think just from yours, Mithali, just the humility to accept that we can solve this challenge and to look at the people who are trying to solve the challenge with that level of empathy as well. So I think on that note, I think a big round of applause to both the wonderful panelists. Thank you so much. I have a small token of gift for you, and then over to Damini.